Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crime in Court. This is the recap of the closing arguments of the trial of Richard Allen, Indiana versus Richard Allen. And I'm just going to cut it to you straight. I don't feel great today. My hip really hurts, but I wanted to get this to you. So my energy is probably going to be a little low. But and it's probably going to be a little shorter of a video just because I don't feel well, but we'll get through this together. All right. So this comes from Caitlin Kendall on her X. She is an anchor and journalist for WRTV Good Morning Indiana. So she is local. She's been there reporting every day. All right, here we go. So closing arguments will start this morning, she's saying, and anticipating the jury will have the case before the end of the day. Updates to follow. So, the prosecution has concluded their closing arguments. They are asking the jury to find Richard Allen guilty on all four counts. Details, I don't know why there's two counts per girl. It doesn't make any sense to me, but there are two separate counts for M word. Details on what was included in the closing arguments as soon as I am able. The defense has concluded their closing arguments. Where did I believe I am starting. Oh, here. Okay. That's where I wanted to start. Never mind. All right. The defense also concluded, now she's updating. Okay, so she went back and updated. So she says the prosecution went first and took 58 minutes to summarize its case. The defense went next and worked for an hour and 18 minutes to convince the jury Allen is not guilty of the homicides. Prosecuting attorney Nicholas McClelland began by saying February 13th is a day this community will never forget. The day Abigail Williams and Liberty German were KILL'd by Richard Allen. Hold on one second. All right, it was going to get loud with the dogs walking. All right, so McClelland talked about how this type of thing doesn't happen in this small community. So, I don't know how small Delphi is. Does anybody have a guess? Because you hear that it's more of a small town, but let's see. What's the population of Delphi? I'm curious. Delphi, Indiana population. Oh, okay. It is a small town. There's less than 3,000 people that live there. So that is pretty small. Comparatively speaking, a typical suburb in Chicago probably has like 20, 30, 40,000 people. So, let me just pick like a random suburb. I'll pick a big suburb. Um, 75,000 people in Schaumburg. Uh, what's another, I think you guys get the point. Schaumburg's a big town. Let me check Naperville. That's another big town around here, suburb wise. Naperville, 150,000 people. So that's even bigger than Schaumburg. Wow, I didn't think so. But yeah, so compared to a suburb in Chicago, it's very tiny. Delphi is very tiny, 3,000 people population. Okay, sorry, I got sidetracked there. I was just curious about how big the town is when they say it is a small community. So it is pretty um, pretty common in small communities like that where everybody knows everyone, and it just it's bizarre that Richard Allen wasn't seen as a suspect way sooner if these sketches are supposedly him, and Bridge Guy supposedly him, and everybody talks in a small town, which just makes me wonder why Richard Allen was just picked blindly out of a hat, in my opinion. I feel like he was. So he also discussed the search efforts on the afternoon and evening of February 13th before the jury was shown photos of the crime scene. Jurors were shown photos of the girls' bodies at the crime scene, and they also say the photos of Libby German's cell phone recovered in water and dirt. So they're trying to play off that um, comment that Officer Mullen said on the stand again when they brought it back again for the umpteenth time, where he said he did a quick Google search and determined that water or dirt getting into the auxiliary port in in an iPhone can make it appear that there's an auxiliary port, like an earphone, headphone, or an auxiliary cord being plugged in, but then it was also unplugged. So you got to remember that. And it was plugged in right at the millisecond of when it started ringing, which makes it even more likely it was manipulated by human hands. Much of the prosecution's closing arguments focused on the video Libby captured at 2:13. The video, McLeland said, the moment Abigail and Liberty were kidnapped. But again, we don't know that. They're telling us words, the officers, law enforcement's telling us what to hear in that video, even though we don't hear it about the girls down the hill, which we think now has been artificially altered somehow. Might not even have been from that cell phone or from that video. And if Bridge Guy's all the way off in the distance where you can barely even see him, and the girls are at the end of the bridge, how can you even hear him talk? It just doesn't make any sense. The whole theory doesn't make any sense from the state. But that's what he says is the moment that the girls were kidnapped in that Bridge Guy video, although, or the Libby, well, yeah, the Down the Hills video, not the Bridge Guy video. Or is it one and the same? I think it is. But, um, what am I saying? I don't know. Uh, I told you guys, my brain's not quite right because my hip's hurting. All right, so he told the jurors something told Liberty to record this. That's total speculation right there. All right, so each of the witnesses who described the man they saw that day had slightly different memories of what he looked like. But McClelland stressed all of them insist the man was Bridge Guy. McClelland told the jury, if we can determine who Bridge Guy is, we will know who took the lives of Abigail and Liberty. Well, exactly, who is Bridge Guy? Because I don't believe Richard Allen is Bridge Guy, but and even if so, I don't believe that that video proves that Bridge Guy did anything because he was in so far off in the distance that there was no way he could be heard speaking, let alone interacting with the girls. They say Allen confirmed to them he was wearing the same clothes seen in the video by Bridge Guy. That was worded strangely. In the video of Bridge Guy. Yeah. Anyways, he confirmed he was on the trail that day. He gave them a different time as to when he was there. When Allen was first interviewed by authorities in 2017, he said he was on the trail around 1:30 p.m. on February 13th. However, in 2023, Allen told police that he was there at 12:30 p.m. that afternoon. They told jurors about how Allen got more angry as the interview continued and refused to let them search his phone or his house. There's a lot of typos in here, sorry. Trying to readjust as I read. So what I was gonna say, because he changed his time and he was getting angry. Well, I would get angry too if I was being accused of something that I didn't do and the law enforcement that I'm talking to isn't listening to me or believing me, and I'm telling them the truth, I'd get upset as well. I wouldn't let them have my phone or my house either without a warrant. Don't let them without an official warrant signed by a judge. All right, so McClelland started talking about items found by police when they executed a search warrant for Allen's home. He said they found a jacket that, surprise, surprise, is the same as Bridge Guy's. They found a bullet inside a Hope box that was the same brand and caliber as the cartridge found at the crime scene. McClelland called the findings the Bridge Guy starter kit. Give me a break. The Carroll County prosecutor pointed to forensic evidence presented by a state witness during the trial. It revolved around a single .40 caliber cartridge found at the scene near the girls' bodies. The expert said, based on the markings found on the cartridge and the physical properties of Allen's gun, it was her opinion the cartridge found on the ground was cycled through Allen's pistol. McClelland looked at the jury and said, that could have been all we had to present to you, but it's not. He said that he had more evidence because Richard Allen began to confess. And here we have all the very flawed false confessions that were coerced, and he was being given drugs, antipsychotic drugs against his will that can cause confusion, delirium, all sorts of things. The prosecution pointed to numerous jailhouse confessions they say were made by Allen. Again, all they have is the bullet and these confessions, and both are flimsy, flimsy evidence. One of them said Allen told them he took their lives with a box cutter and threw it away at the CVS where he worked. As Nicholas McClelland began to wrap up his closing statements, he pointed to testimony from Master Trooper Brian Harshman with the Indiana State Police. Harshman listened to hundreds of telephone calls made by Richard Allen in prison. He testified the voice of Bridge Guy from the video is the voice of Richard Allen, which he is not a voice analysis expert. He does not have any kind of expertise to make that claim. He's a trooper. He does not have, you know, skilled forensics of being able to investigate if voices are similar forensically on digital evidence. He does not. Yeah, unless I missed it somewhere, but I never heard that. So now all the pieces are clear, said McClelland. Now all the pieces are together. He continued, Richard Allen is Bridge Guy. He kidnapped them and later emmed them. McClelland said he cut their throats. McClelland told the jury Allen wanted to R them, but saw a van and got scared. He said Allen made them cross the creek into a secluded area. The prosecutor said Allen slit Libby's throat first, and she grabbed her neck as she clung to life. McClelland also said Allen left behind his bullet and Liberty German's cell phone, which is what led investigators to him. He concluded by saying to the 12 jurors and 3 alternates, I am going to ask you to look at all the evidence and issue a guilty verdict on all 4 counts. When the prosecution finished with closing arguments, Judge Fran Gull called for a recess. Court resumed with Richard Allen's defense team starting its closing arguments a little before 10:45 a.m. Judge Gull set aside 2 to 2.5 hours for each side to make its closing arguments. Defense attorney Brad Rosie to handed the closing arguments for Richard Allen's legal team. He said there are 4 themes here related to the prosecution. They are what he describes as a broken timeline, bumbling ballistics, false confessions, and digital forensics/data. Rosie said the prosecution mishandled the case in many ways. He told the jurors, what is most important is what they don't want you to know, what we had to tell you time and time again. We had to do their job. Damn right. They did not investigate this. The defense repeatedly attacked the state's presentation of the case. It pointed out there was never a height analysis done on the bridge guy video, and I think it was like 10 grand they could have paid and gotten that done. And then we would know, was the bridge guy 5'4", or closer to Allen's height, or 5'10", closer to the description of Betsy Blair and Sarah Carbow and all the others that were there that day that saw a man who was tall and muscular and young with poofy hair, which does not describe Allen. Rosie told the jurors how the prosecution lost many videotaped sessions of interviews early in the case. Those sessions were with people who came forward with information for investigators early in the case. Rosie said to the jury that the state did not tell them about the lost tapes, but the defense did. That's right. They're trying to hide things. Over and over again, they've tried to hide stuff for the jury. The defense attorney also talked to the jury and credited them for their question that led to information being disclosed about the Ford Focus seen on surveillance video. He said the state did not do that. Rosie questioned the testimony of many of the state's witnesses. He started by saying that Betsy Blair's description of Bridge Guy was boyish and youthful. They pointed out that Richard Allen is neither. Rosie said Sarah Carbow changed her story about what she saw on the trails on February 13th, 2017. He said that she was operating under an idea of suggestibility and that she changed her story after seeing the video of Bridge Guy to better match what the video shows. Rosie told the jurors, "You are the judge of credibility. You may discount the testimony of a witness altogether." He continued to knock the prosecution's presentation, saying it did not bring McCain as a witness because McCain's timeline does not fit the state's timeline. He said the same could be said for the state not calling Shelby Hicks as a witness. Rosie said the route Richard Allen told investigators he took to the trails was also did not fit the timeline that the state wanted him to say. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. Defense attorney Brad Rosie then looked at the jurors and said, "There are two pieces of evidence you really need to consider. Look at the two interrogation videos of Richard Allen being questioned by police and see how Richard Allen conducted himself." Defense then turned the jury's attention to other people who could have committed the homicides of Williams and German. He stated that Brad Weber, a man who lives near the Monon High Bridge, Weber testified during the trial. Rosie and Weber, like Allen, owns a .40 caliber Sig Sauer pistol. They said Weber had sticks in his garage. Various people testified that there were sticks found on the girls' bodies at the crime scene. And remember, some were cut by some kind of a saw or something. So that's also a question as to where did they get that cut? Did they cut it there? Did they bring it with them? Maybe it was always on the property itself. Rosie said Weber gave police a different story about going straight home after work on February 13th when he was questioned about that day. Hold on one second. We got garbage day today. All right, it passed. All right, so Rosie asked the jury to consider what happened on April 3rd, 2023. He said there were 3 phone calls made from Richard Allen in Westville to his mother and his wife, Kathy, but the state only played 2 of them. He asked the jury why the state did not offer up the 3rd phone call as context to them or for them. Why not tell the whole story? As part of the closing arguments, Rosie said to the jury, "The state didn't tell you ISP ended the FBI partnership. We had to tell you." It was part of many claims by the defense that the state does not that the state did not do its job properly. So that's one of many instances. He told the jurors they should question the credibility of this investigation based on what they aren't telling you. Why so much hidden? Several times, Rosie told the jury the state is desperate. He said they were desperate to fit the van driven by Weber into the timeline. They're desperate about why the DNA testing on the strand of hair found in Abby's hand just done recently, and they were desperate about why the state just did searches of Alan's cell phone to see his internet search history. Rosie said those are all examples of how the state is molding facts to fit this case. They got their man, arrested him, and then they're trying to pin things on him, anything that they can. Rosie said those are all examples of how they're molding the facts. Sorry, I just said that. He provided an example when he said the state realized that during a break in the trial, they offered a fast food Google search having to do with phone jack on Libby's phone. He said Google is not what they use as reliable sources. Exactly. And again, he says they are desperate. He highlighted the testimony of Dr. Core, the doctor who conducted the autopsies on William and German's bodies. Rosie reminded the jury Core testified he originally thought there were multiple weapons involved in the homicides, but he could not provide a conclusion as to what kind of weapons were used. Rosie told the jury how the defense did a deposition of Dr. Core. The defense attorney said after our deposition, he went home and at some point looked at his garage and ta-da, a box cutter. Yeah. Rosie told the jury they learned Dr. Kaur met with the prosecutors 3 times after the deposition before he stated a box cutter may have been used on the girls. So it was not until his third or fourth time that he actually used the term box cutter. The defense says the state has ignored and doesn't want to talk about the possibility of multiple actors in this case. Rosie even cited investigators have thought that there were multiple people involved early on, and even after Alan was arrested, mind you. The defense then took time to talk about the crime scene. Rosie told the jury the perpetrator took one girl while controlling the other, and so the perpetrator KI double L'd one girl while controlling and then KI double L'ing the other. Redressed Abby, then covered the bodies with sticks. He shared that the crime scene was very labor intensive, meaning it was probably multiple people involved. Rosie says it's not plausible that a 5'5" man did all of that in the short time frame too that they're saying. The defense says Alan cooperated with police, even telling them he was on the bridge that day and did an interview with investigators. He says the interview Allen had with police in 2017, the officers said there was nothing unusual about Richard Allen. The defense took time to address what they called the magic bullet. Rosie said when Allen's gun was at the lab, Dr. Oberg cycled a round 4 to 6 times and marks weren't sufficient enough to determine any kind of a match. He said Dr. Oberg started comparing apples to oranges by firing a round to compare. The defense said Oberg lacked documentation, sorry. She lacked documentation of her work. Rosie said, "Where in the hell are the sufficient agreements and marks that match?" Rosie called the science a dangerous business and a suggestive game. The defense reminded the jury that it's not their burden of proof, which is why they didn't have their firearms expert re examine the round found at the scene. That's why. So that was asked by the prosecution, why didn't you examine his round and the gun and everything? They didn't need to because it's not their burden to prove that it wasn't his gun. The defense then attacks the confessions, calling them false confessions. Defense attorney Rosie said Richard Allen was a fragile egg when he landed on the doorstep of the Department of Corrections. He said no human, no matter how strong, could endure those conditions for that long without having a breakdown. Rosie shared again that the DOC's rule for solitary confinement is 30 days, but that turned into 13 months for Alan. Rosie brought up the testimony from the psychiatrist who said Alan was not psychotic when he made an admission of guilt to him. However, he reminded the jury that that video played for them and it showed Alan appearing to be out of it the same day. Rosie said, "Who would possibly watch that video and for 1 second believe that man was oriented to time and place?" Good point. He was sloppy. He was like falling over. People had to pick him up. His head was like listing from side to side. He was incoherent. He seemed very dazed. Rosie then took time to share their timeline with Libby's cell phone, saying that if at 5:45 p.m. headphones were plugged into Libby's phone at almost precisely the exact millisecond that it started ringing, and by plugging it in, it would silence the phone. So maybe that was done intentionally. And then it was unplugged, whatever it was, nearly 5 hours later at 10:32. Rosie said someone was clearly using the phone during that time, though the state refutes that claim. Rosie then focused in on the lack of DNA evidence in this case, reminding the jury there is not a single piece of trace evidence that ties Alan to the homicides of Abby and Libby, not one single digital connection to Alan to the girls, he said, from Alan. Not one digital connection of Alan to the girls. There's so many errors in this. I apologize. Rosie then talked about how common a Carhartt jacket is and how it isn't unusual that investigators found one in Alan's home. Boy, there's a revelation for you, he said. He probably asked half of that town and half of the men in that town, let's say, and they probably have a Carhartt jacket because that's the time it's a blue collar, hardworking town. The defense then pointed to what they called an overwhelming lack of evidence in this case and provided examples. No one identified Richard Allen as the man on the bridge. No digital data connects Allen. No fingerprint data connects Allen. No DNA connects Allen. No trace evidence materials connect Allen. And no forensic evidence connects Allen. Rosie said, "The state's timeline crumbles. The magic bullet is nothing more than a tragic bullet, and the phone raw data doesn't lie. All of those things make it virtually impossible for Richard Allen to have committed this crime." Rosie left the jury with images of a rack used to integrate and torture people in the medieval times. He said the current day version is solitary confinement. Damn, that leaves a good impression. He then showed the jury pictures of Alan in prison and finally a photo of a snake suffocating a rodent and said, "This is the power of the state." Rosie told the jury now is not the time to return to medieval times and acknowledge this is not the way to function. He said, "We are asking you to set Richard Allen free and enter a verdict of not guilty." The defense took 1 hour and 17 seconds to deliver their closing argument. The prosecutor took just under 10 minutes to deliver his rebuttal after they came back from lunch. So McLeland said, "Now is the time we turn the case over to you. You're in the driver's seat." He told the jury the defense didn't back up the claims they promised during opening statements. McLeland said the prosecution has. I find that laughable because the state can't back up any of their claims, and Allen's team has refuted all of them, I think, quite successfully. McLeland addressed the defense's claims that no one heard anything on the bridge the day of the homicides. McLeland said the girls were scared. He said Allen had a gun. The prosecutor said Allen left behind his calling card, which was a bullet. Usually, a calling card is something that you leave behind intentionally at every crime scene. He didn't, if This is supposedly his bullet. He didn't mean to do it. So this isn't a calling card. That's a dumb analogy. I don't think Nick knows the law or has much common sense, to be quite honest. McClellan again addressed the confessions. He said that repeatedly the defense has said words matter, but the prosecutor said they don't matter for Richard Allen when talking about the confessions he made. Yeah, because he was in a state of psychosis, they don't matter. McClellan said the evidence in this case shows you Bridge Guy took the lives of Abby and Libby, and Bridge Guy is Richard Allen. The prosecutor closed by reminding the jury the girls are more than victims, they are heroes. McClellan described why he believes the two are heroes. Libby took video on her phone. Abby concealed the phone under her body. How do we know that she did that on purpose? And Abby and Libby covered the bullet for investigators to find. No, they didn't. It was like partially in the ground and sticking up. They had to find it with like a light because it shined in the light. They couldn't even find it with their naked eye, the cops. So his whole argument just doesn't even fly with me. I mean, are they heroes? I I don't know. I would need to know more about what happened, and I don't believe I know anything about what happened to the girls. All I know is that I don't believe Richard Allen did it. I have enough doubt there. And I do believe that they tortured him mentally, physically, emotionally in order to break him and get him to confess. That is what I believe. McLeland finalized his argument by reminding the jury of Becky Patty's statement on the witness stand. Libby told Becky, "Someday I am going to grow up and help police solve crimes." She did and brought Abby along with her. That's how he ends it. This case is now in the hands of the jury. I know they like to, pull on the heartstrings, but that's what you're going with? I don't, I don't know. And it only works if you got the right guy. This only works if you have the right guy or guys and maybe even gals that were involved in this. So she's not growing up and solving crimes, or at least she's not solving crimes if the wrong person is going to be convicted for something that somebody else did or somebody's else. So I'm checking right now to see if there's any updates, but I don't see anything regarding Delphi. So at this point, I will leave you guys as the jury's still deliberating. They returned to the courthouse this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time, and I forget that there's the time change there. But um, they've reconvened. They are going over deliberations again. We're still waiting. Yeah, I just got another update. No. So nothing yet, but people have been putting out signs. Actually, let me show you. So this is pretty amazing. And I've been saying this for a while, like, why are people not more outraged and going and protesting in this area, especially against Judge Gull? Well, in front of the courthouse today, there are signs upon signs that are, I'm gonna mute that. So people are making their own signs and sticking them out there in front of the courthouse, putting, you know, uh, recognizing certain people that have been bringing this to light from the beginning and trying to bring more awareness. Let's see, we've got some pictures here too. Resting gull face. We are not gullible. I hate Judge Gull so much. Today is the day. Isn't that like the family's motto? I don't know. But yeah, so we have a bunch of photos, which I think is pretty cool. And people are not photos, but signs. And people are w- waking up to what's going on over here and trying to bring more awareness, which I think is awesome. So uh, I'm an advocate for advocating for the innocent and victims of the justice system, victims of abuse. All right. Well, I will leave you guys at this. I will keep an eye out. I know I'm not feeling well, but I will keep an eye out and at least post something on my community tab and on my X page if we get a verdict sometime today. There is, I do know they are going each day 9 to 4, Monday through Friday, with their deliberations, unless the jury says that they want to stay later or go home or whatever. And I do know that they are deliberating Saturday. If it goes to Saturday, they will deliberate tomorrow. But probably only their half a day that they do. So probably it would be only like 9 to 12 or something, 9 to 1. So let me know what you guys think about this and what you guys think the verdict will be. I look forward to hearing from you and reading your comments. Please hit that like button on your way out, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye now.